Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our program, Are You Being Served? Programming for Emerging Adults. I'm Jamie Machik with the Nicolet Federated Library System, and I'm very happy that we have Jessica Jupitus, who's the Public Services Manager at the Sacramento Library, and Lori Easterwood, a City Librarian at the Folsom Public Library. They're both out of California. They both were movers and shakers in 2015, and I was not surprised when I opened up the Library Journal to see that, because they're doing some awesome things for adults in this age group, and they're going to talk about some of those things in today's presentation. So Jessica and Lori, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. All right, so thank you guys for attending this webinar. You can see our contact information is here. It will also be on the final slide. I am going to make sure I'm clicking in here to get this. I'm Jessica Jupitus. So I have been with Sacramento Public Library for the last 9 years, almost exactly. I've worked in 7 different libraries, starting as a youth librarian and ending up as a public services manager that supports 7 branches. Lori and I got really close when we were system-wide programming team, and that was when Alt Library started, which was our programming for emerging adults. I would also like to clarify that in the slide that Jamie had, the picture of us together, Lori is not tiny. I was on roller skates at the time. So while she is not as tall as I am, she is not quite that small.
Yeah, so this is me, Lori Easterwood. I worked for Sacramento Public for about 8 years and then left to open my own business called Make Do Sacramento, which was an antique shop and crafting emporium that was a lot of fun, but ultimately I got sucked back into libraries, and I'm now the director of the Folsom Public Library. But as Jess said, we got our real start together at the alt library program that we were doing. So let's start talking about that a little bit. So why do programming for people in their 20s and 30s? Well, we were tasked with providing programs on a system-wide basis. So we were part of a team that did programming for people of all ages throughout the Sacramento Public Library
Which
system.
is 28 branches.
Yeah.
28 different branches. We would do the same program. We did a zombie program in 18 of the 28 branches, and I was so sick of the smell of fake blood by the end of it.
So we started that. It was during the big economic downturn. It was a way to save some money. We lost our entire programming budget, but we started growing our own talent within for programming. So we had the children's stuff pretty well in hand and all the usual adult computer classes. Some of the rest of the team, they had gone to ALA in 2009 and saw a really great presentation by Oak Park, Illinois Library about their Genre X stuff. And it's essentially, they asked the question is, if you weren't paid to be here, would you come to the library program? And the answer was no for us. So we started thinking about how we could create programming for people in our age group. Now, Jess and I are both on that cusp of millennial. I'm a little bit older than Jess, but still, millennial-ish. So we're still in the 20s and 30s age bracket, but only barely at this point.
Just barely toes in.
Yeah. So 40 very soon for both of us. But at the time when we started this back in 2010, we were solidly in our early 30s, late 20s, and so were most of the residents using the Sacramento Public Library. We were surprised because, we had worked in several branches, but we never actually saw these people inside the library. Or if we did, they would come and get holds. They also were not coming to programs. So we stalked a bunch of other libraries doing similar 20s and 30s things and started our own deal, which started out with a really cheesy book club, Books, Bars, and Beans, that met out in coffee shops around town. It wasn't named that for long, and we'll go on to talk about library. But just recently, you may have seen a study put out by Pew that millennials are the most likely generation of Americans to use public libraries. So chances are you have a lot of these folks in your community using the library, but maybe not engaging the way you want. So that's the point of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and you can see, based on the stats for Sacramento County, this was 40% of our population and almost 40% of our card holders. So it made sense to try to do something and see what success we would have, because as you know, we've got the families coming in, we've got the kids, we've got the college students, and then they come back when they have their own kids, and there's that big gap. So we wanted to make things happen, and that's why we did what we did. So on to Alt Library.
So Alt Library started out very grassroots in our department of 3 folks, Jess, me, and one other person, Michelle Rosenthal. The image on the left is an early logo that Jessica Sharon Schnetted, paper cut. That was also one of our programs. Eventually, once we'd been going for a little while, we got our graphics department to create some branding for us. So, and that was the logo there on the right.
And it's very safe and very boring, and it doesn't scream like, hey, pick me up, I'm interested. Alt Library, that logo really doesn't say this is for emerging adults.
No, but it's on brand. So to begin with, we knew that branding was going to be really important for this programming initiative. And because we didn't at the time have a graphics department that was strong for people in their 20s and 30s, that wasn't the look we were getting. We actually crowdsourced it using Volunteer Match. So we got some volunteers to do the coaster on the left. And this was one of our first things. So we put these coasters in bars and coffee shops around town. The other side of the coaster had programming that we were doing. And then eventually we got a new graphics department, and they did this really cool coaster on the right for our Edgar Allan Poe series. And that went along with its own beer, Edgar Allan Porter. So this was part of bringing Alt Library to the full Sacramento community. We did one book that was the work of Edgar Allan Poe, but so you can see branding really kind of progressed here at the library, and we really credit that with a big part of the popularity of these programs. So back to some of the older stuff. The stuff on the left are the ones by our newer graphics department, and the stuff on the right, again, more of those crowdsourced things from volunteers out in the community. Now, remember, this is back in 2010, so well before Canva and the marvelous ease of things looking pretty good on the cheap. So we were pretty happy with the fact that we got volunteer graphic designers. So people were interested in this whole 2030s thing. And yeah, so these are some of the programs we'll be talking about later as well.
But you can see that it still looks like library programs. It doesn't necessarily look like something that would inspire you or delight you. So in 2016, which is 6 years later, we made a new logo. And it was weeks of conversation like, hey, no eyeballs. This one's too Illuminati. This wasn't creepy enough. We need more book themes. So it led to the one that you see here, which is, you know, the tentacles. It's kind of creepy. It looks exciting. It has a book reference. And this one has actually been really popular. And every time we take tattoos of this image out, they are gone within minutes. So it definitely is a change, as you remember from the earlier logo. So how did we do it? We started with a Meetup that was free for a couple of years, and then it was now very inexpensive. I think it's maybe $10, maybe like under $100 a year to have this Meetup. At the time that I created this PowerPoint, there were over 1,700 people following. Now we're over 2,000. So people are following and getting event updates. Meetup is a terrific way, especially for new people to the community, to find out what you're doing. It started originally as mostly people that we already knew or librarians who heard us speak over the years. So we'd have folks following from Wisconsin, for example, but you know, you guys weren't going to come to any of our meetups. We kind of knew that. And then we made flyers and posters, which is pretty standard. And then we did a blog that then turned into a Tumblr, and the coasters, like Lori mentioned previously. And then once we started adding programming, we really promoted things everywhere. We did them online in a variety of different venues. We chatted up reporters, we'd send media pitches, we'd create YouTube videos, which I hope nobody ever finds. They're still out there, but please don't look for them. And then word of mouth, which, as you guys know, is the biggest seller of library programs. Surprisingly enough, we never had really a presence on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or on the library's websites. We flew under the radar of being officially recognized by the system, though we did have the blessing of a very supportive library director, but we were never on the library website, so it made it eventually a little bit confusing for people who would look for it on the library website and not find it, but knew that we were with Sacramento Public Library. So it was a really strange split that lasted about 7 years, but it's kind of finally been addressed.
Yeah, but the good thing about that was we knew that the people who were coming were really finding us organically out in the community, which is where they were looking for things. You know, they weren't coming to the library, but we were able to convert people to libraries because the programming was fun for them. So I'm glad that it's more connected now, but it was a good way to start things out, surprisingly.
Yeah, it did work out really well for us. So one of the first things that we did, my numbers got all messed up. Sorry about that. We started with a meetup with the Lori and Jess show. So in 2010, which is the first box, and again, I apologize for the numbers. These are all books that we picked that we wanted to read for book club. We have 7 full years of selections, as you can see here. So some of them we definitely regretted. We probably should have reread Geek Love before recommending it for a book club, because necrophilia is really a challenging topic for polite conversation.
Among strangers.
Yeah, when you're working. But some of them were part of system initiatives, like the one book. So those are the ones that are in bold, where we tried to have all of Sacramento read one book. But we opted out of those, or the Let's Talk program, which happened later in the 2015 or 2016 one with Smoke Gets in Your Eye of Caitlin Dowdy, who's a LA-based mortician, who's actually coming to talk tonight, and I'm very excited about it. Anyway, on beauty, epic failure. People hated it. One guy came because he hated it so much he had to talk about it, but it was a really, really good conversation because people really enjoyed hating it and talking about that. So we average about 8 to 15 people per book club meeting of all genders, and the group varies. We have quite a lot of ghost readers too, so people who can't make it to the book club for whatever reason. They have a class, they have work, they have whatever, but they still read the selections. And so that was kind of a nice surprise. I found that out when I was working at a different branch for a day, and somebody mentioned, oh yeah, I always read those, but I can't make it. And I was like, oh, well, that's my program. I'm so glad you read them. You know, give me a little boost there.
Yeah. The other great thing about starting a book club for people in their 20s, 30s was that we needed books that, a large quantity of books that weren't the typical thing we'd buy 20 copies of. So it actually started the library's book club in a box program, which is now hugely successful, and all of the different library branches use it. So nice to get this kind of worked into the general programming for Sac Public too.
Absolutely. And so that's where, you know, a person can check out 14 copies of a title with a single barcode and a list of discussion questions curated by the librarian so that they could run their own book club. At first, it was really confusing for people who thought that they would get like a variety of books in a single box to check out and read. And yeah, it didn't go well. But now people have it sorted out, and our book clubs in a box circulate like crazy. So like Lori said, that was a really nice thing. Also, our one book in 2014 was the Constitution, so we politely declined that option in the interest of keeping people coming to our book club. And then in 2013, we tried a walk. So this was working with the Downtown Grid, who is a company that does maps of businesses, and they do Eat the Grid, Shop the Grid, and something, Art on the Grid, where they have different businesses who submit, and they create these maps. So they gave us a blank map very generously, and we decided we were going to try a walk. So because May has nice weather in California, our book was travel themed, and I've read an article about a book called Mapping Manhattan, where a woman had blank maps. She walked through Manhattan. She handed out to police officers, models, senior citizens, folks on the street, these maps, asked them to map their Manhattan and mail the personalized maps back to her. So this, you know, filled up her box with all kinds of different maps, and kind of like a post-secret tribute to New York. So we used the Downtown Grid, who gave us this PDF, with the intent that we would distribute it to our members and create their own maps of downtown. So what happened was our book club had this guided tour of downtown Sacramento. Since we read Geography of Bliss, we started with our blog readers asking, what's your happiest place in Midtown? We gave parameters and a start point and kind of began compiling. From the results, we created a route that was about 2 miles.
That's about 1 mile too long. Jess left after the first mile and left me alone in the dark walking through Midtown with a whole bunch of people. But it worked out fine. But it was a bit long.
Yeah, don't do that. It took 2 hours instead of our usual 1 hour. But people stayed engaged the whole time. They stayed talking about the book for 2 whole hours. And then when we got to each of the places that people had submitted, we paused. The person who'd submitted why they, the site shared why they'd chosen it, and then kind of smaller groups formed naturally as you kept walking and you kind of stopped and started. So we made it an annual tradition for our May book clubs. The radius got much smaller, as you can see in the image here. And in 2014, we did What's Your Favorite Place to Get Lost, and read A Field Guide to Getting Lost. We found a really incredible found object sculpture in an alleyway that one of our members had stumbled across after an evening out. Do you remember that one,
yeah.
Andrew? Beautiful, beautiful iron peacock made out of old tools. So things that you never would have seen had Andrew not been drunk wandering down an alley one night.
Yeah.
2015, the question was, where do you go to be alone? And the book was Tracks, which, if you've never read, is about traveling across the outback of Australia. And there was a lot of discussion on what it means to travel alone, to eat out alone, and all sorts of other cultural norms like that. 2016 was What's Your Favorite Spot for Grown-Ups Only? And the book we read was What I Was Doing While You Were Breeding. This was the first one that I had missed, and I was very sad about it because I was in Arizona with my family. And then this year, we did Show Me Your Best Public Art, and the book was On Looking, a book with 11 essays on taking a walk with different experts, like artist or a geologist or a toddler, and kind of what you see from those different perspectives based on who you're walking with. And yeah, all books that I recommend strongly.
So a little step backward to Edgar Allan Poe again. This was an interesting program because Jess mentioned, sometimes you want this programming for people in their 20s and 30s to be part of your system-wide programming, and yet they don't necessarily, if you look at the people in the picture, that's one of our smaller book clubs, people coming out to read Edgar Allan Poe, even though we did have it in a bar that had the beer brewed for the series. I think this is a good cautionary tale. So make sure that you are keeping on brand when you're part of these larger things. So the Poe stuff looked really cool. It actually won awards for the PR. It was just a little bit more of a difficult sell. We kind of stepped away from the feel that we normally had with our programming, and it's okay, we didn't lose people permanently, but again, it always felt a little strange when we did that. Mm-hmm. So here's a big list of programs that you guys can come back to, and always feel free to email us with questions about any one in particular. We're going to go through in the next few slides some of our favorites and how they went down, and you'll see a history of the evolution of advertising for alt library. So Bollywood, this was one of my early cut and paste into some kind of, word or something. But Bollywood Spectacular was a huge hit at the library that Jessica was managing at the time. You talk about it.
Yeah, it was North Sac Library. It was a very urban branch, small, one room, and not a place that people really wanted to be after dark. And we thought, but what if we did an after-hours program? Would people come?
And they did.
We had about 60 people who came for this Bollywood Spectacular program that we had set up. And it was really a lot of fun. Like, we didn't know how this would go. We didn't know how successful it would be. We had one Bollywood film in our movie licensing, which was called Zavaria. And it is the Indian version of Dostoevsky's short story, The White Knights. So it could not have been a better fit for a library program, really. We had a henna artist, we had a homemade chai, a Bollywood dance lesson. And so that is me leading a Bollywood dance lesson. I am a huge Bollywood fan. I am not Indian. I have never trained. But as you'll find that Lori and I have been completely shameless in what we do. Like, you just got to let go of yourself and do whatever it is. So I was like, well, I know a lot of the dance moves, so I can do this. And that's our life.
Yeah, that was our life with alt library. So that was kind of the theme. It's like, well, we'll just do it ourselves if nobody else is doing it. So it worked out to varying degrees. We'll talk about some of the disasters as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've had that. But it's the first time that we've done anything like this in a branch. And it took a lot of struggle to get there. My supervisor at the time was not on board with it. But our library director was super on board with it. And she and her husband came, and she had tears in her eyes looking at this crammed library full of people watching a Bollywood movie, which if you've ever watched one, they're like 3 hours long. So this is an investment of time.
Same branch, we did a spelling bee for adults. This was totally ripped off of Genre X, I think. We changed the name slightly. Theirs was called Spell Yeah, which was cuter even. This is, again, with a good graphic designer. This was probably the best part of this program were all the partnerships that Jess came up with for the prizes. It was also very popular, but tell Jess.
Yeah,
Jess talk.
It was a lot of fun. So I judged a few spelling bee fundraisers with the Gender Health Center here, and so we figured we were basically experts in how to do that, and decided we could do it. So we compiled the words, we wrote the sentences, we established the rules, we hustled the prizes. Our big score was from the Greens Hotel, which was down the street from my library at the time. They were an eco-friendly boutique hotel, and each of their rooms, as you can see in the image there, has a giant letter hanging down in front of it. So I thought, well, this is perfect. I went over there, I asked them, and they generously donated a room and a bottle of wine for the grand prize for the spelling bee. So that was really nice. We also gave a dictionary to the first person eliminated, which was a nice little dig. But again, it was after hours, small branch library, and we had over 40 adults who came. Only about half of them participated, which was fine, but it was a lot of people. And then the rules here. And again, this is not going to be something that you're reading right now while we're doing the presentation, but you can look back at it, and I'm always happy to send you the Word document with all of this in there. The funds that we raised were minimal for this, so we had tried to establish a friends group. It failed. Don't do this. But they were present and hustling it. And Lori, bless her, has a very low tolerance for the embarrassment of strangers. So she was concerned about that. But it was really strangely supportive for something competitive like that. So first eliminated, like we said, got a dictionary. Second place got a Scrabble Deluxe game that had been donated. And then everybody spelled at least one word right. So they all felt successful about that. But it was pretty fun.
It was. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about personal passions. So as I mentioned, I left libraries for about a year and opened a craft shop. There have been a number of library paid crafting endeavors in our alt library past. So Retro Crafts was a great success. After the miserable failure of Hipster Crafts, apparently, even though they are totally hipsters, nobody wanted to come to a program called Hipster Crafts. It just failed at every branch. Yep. And because we did these programs at so many places and we planned them out ahead of time, so it was not just one failure we would have. We would have like 15 hardcore failures for like DIY weddings. At the time, neither Jess nor I were married, had never had a big wedding, or even really been to that many of them. So this was biting off more than we could chew doing that. But RetroCraft was a success, and eventually some of our programming for adults, the craft things, did turn out to be quite successful. So, and I always love doing them. But yeah, so be careful with your branding on that stuff.
Yeah. All right. So exercise programs. This was another personal strength thing, and the idea that this wasn't happening in a lot of libraries. So the first exercise program that we did was punk rock aerobics, which was inspired by a book of the same name. I used Grooveshark to create a playlist. That was before Grooveshark had legal troubles. And thank you, Anne, for saying DIY wedding sounds awesome. It wasn't, but we wanted it to be. So Grooveshark, and then I put some moves together myself. Most important thing about this was that we worked with our library legal counsel on a waiver that would protect everyone just in case some type of injury should occur. So shown here is the very lackluster flyer that we had for the Pride theme come out for aerobics, which had songs like RuPaul's Superstar. And then Library Journal ended up asking to write up a Programs That Pop feature. So the link for that is shared here as well if you're interested in how to do your own punk rock aerobics. And then Lori drew me that beautiful alt fitness hardcore for the harder core. I also hope you guys know I'm pointing at the screen and circling things, but it's a webinar, so you can't see that. So included here in alphabetical order are the programs. You can see there were quite a few of these. They were completely free. They cost my time only. They were really fun, and they were really kind of subverting the stereotype. Some of the highlights that I had were sharing music that I love, like black metal, while doing a very calming yoga flow. I happen to find metal very calming. Not everybody does. Zombie Survival happened in October for 3 years in a row and has always been one of the best attended. So all of the songs are zombie themed. And if you haven't heard Jonathan Colton's song Regarding Your Brains, I suggest looking it up after the webinar because it is a fantastic song. Anne has asked an excellent question. So my wife is from England, and I have a good grasp now of British slang, I feel. So hench is the British term for ripped or strong or swole or whatever you want to do. So the hench as heck of workout was with a Britpop soundtrack, and it was all body weight strength movements. So hench is your term for swole if you want to sound British and fancy. And then industrial strength was body weight strength moves with bands like Wumpscut and Skinny Puppy. And then Riot Girl Plyo was screamy girl music and explosive and awful. And then I became central library manager, so all of my programming time went into other avenues. But you can see here some of the photos from the early days of the workout. Corpse paint from the brutal yoga one. I regret that we never got photos of the guys who came in spandex and headbands for the Guns N' Roses type hair metal aerobics. But if you email me, I am happy to share the waiver and the playlist that I have and the fitness moves that I did. And of course, the disclaimer that this is just for fun. And if it hurts, don't do it. And any other things like, I am not a fitness professional. I am a librarian, but not a fitness professional.
What is hair aerobics, Jessica?
Hair aerobics was hair metal aerobics. So it was working out to things like Guns N' Roses, Twisted Sister, Cinderella, that kind of thing.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, so you can see Jessica has a deep knowledge of a lot of things that appeal to a subculture group that isn't normally served by the library. So
and also to Katie's question, yes, we, like Lori said, we did programs in all of our different size branches. So I used to run the Cortland Library. Cortland is a town south of Sacramento that has 600 people total in the town. So it was a small library, and we still got people in. It was just kind of more personalized. You know, we talked to folks and see, what do you want to see? Okay, sorry.
No, it's fine. So we would concentrate the alt library things as a central core in the downtown libraries as much as possible, because Jess bounced around so much managing different libraries. At some point, the programming team kind of split up. I stayed in the programming department, became the programming supervisor. Jess became a branch manager, and we kind of scaled back the system-wide programming. At the same time, we took a lot of this great fun stuff that we were doing with Alt Library and made it so that it could be replicated by other librarians throughout the system in the form of box programming, which is what the programming department eventually became focused on, creating these boxes that anybody could take and do whatever they wanted. So here are a list of craft programs, some of them not terribly out there, some of them are, that were either for Alt Library or used throughout the system. So Broadcast Holidays was a great one, and that one was one where we really had to fight to get the name. It was made up of crafts that we'd done at other things, but
it was really like pretty generic holiday craft.
Yeah,
it was nothing special.
But the name got it in the paper, and of course in our local free paper, which is where all the 20s and 30s folks would get their news. So that was another one of those importance of branding things, and it was one of our early efforts, and pretty great. We've done that just about every year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the conversation went, I'm uncomfortable with the dollar signs. It looks too much like it says ass. Could you change it to asterisks? And our answer was, well, no, for two reasons. One, because the dollar signs make total sense. You're saying you're broke. And two, asterisks look like anuses. So let's not do that.
Yeah. So we got our way, and it was a great success. That was probably one of our bigger programming craft programs, like 70 people.
Yep.
And like I said, it was a number of programs that we then created boxes for, so it would have a life beyond Alt Library.
So it was things like creating iris folded cards and doing embroidered journals and most of the crafting stuff that you see there. I think we did like a print your own holiday gift wrap, but nothing too exciting. It's just the name.
The name, and people really came out for that name. So a lot of fun. All right.
But DIY parties, not DIY weddings, DIY parties, no good.
No good. No good. Bad art night, very good.
Very good.
Yeah. So this is one that we had heard of from another library, and just it is empty out your craft closet and have people go to town to make the worst project possible. We awarded prizes for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the prizes are pretty key here. So things like fuzzy pen posters, those black ones that you use the markers on.
Velvet posters, velvet unicorns.
Yes. Paint by numbers kits, some actual art kits, and the voting was done by the whole crowd. So some pretty scary clowns have been painted in that, all kinds of tasteless things. But, you know, so I love a craft, as I've said, and I think it's really great for adults to get a chance to kind of play at the library, and they do enjoy it. So something free form like this, where they're not, you know, expected to turn out something, you know, according to a plan, actually works really well. So food programs, we did a lot of these. This is one of those that these days, I don't know that we would do the same, because unlike Jess getting the waivers for her exercise classes, we just kind of did a whole bunch of food things.
And before we continue on the food, we will address the question that just came up. Concern about the name Bad Art Night? No. We were really lucky in making sure that we let people know it was to make the worst art, and that we celebrated no matter what you did. And we really made a supportive atmosphere where we walked around and said, like, oh no, you've got to add some pom-poms on that. It's looking too good. And people seem to really enjoy it. We also worked with the Crocker on one of them, the Crocker, which is our local art museum, and they had somebody come out to judge it, and people really enjoyed it. And like Lori said, it's that release of pressure. Like, you don't have to make anything good. You just come in and do the worst. And we played, like, God, what did we play as background music? We had
I think we did
like,
classical music. Like, we did fancy music. So they were creating bad art with, you know, and that's why we had the different categories. So if you were actually a good artist, the content could be in poor taste, you know, kittens in a basket kind of thing.
And sad clowns and that sort of thing. So
yeah.
It was really fun, but we managed to not have any problems. People seemed to understand pretty well what bad art meant.
Again, partly because of the advertising, we would put a picture of a clown on the things, you know, classic bad. So, so food programming. Yeah, so this is where, now that we are more management-y type people, we would be a little less interested in saying, hey, go for this. It worked really well. People love these. Again, we got in over our head because neither of us are cooks, but we would do basically a cooking show. And, you know, fountain of soup, when you don't have the blender on, the lid on properly in front of a crowd of people, added to the allure. People, I think, came to see how big of a mess we'd make.
Oh, yeah.
They loved it. They loved the food. So we did things like raw foods, and that's what Summer Uncooking was. A lot of vegan programs, and would try to blend in my love of gardening, so that herb garden mixology thing. You know, I harvested a lot of stuff out of my own yard and would bring it to the library. Now we have far less food in all of our libraries. So anyway, they were a great hit. I would definitely recommend paying someone to do these.
Yes, and giving allergy warnings and not feeling bad if people didn't like it. And people would refuse to listen. We were like, okay, we're not librarians. We are librarians. We're not nutritionists. We're not raw foodists. So we kept explaining again and again, well, this is just an overview. For more information, here are some books. And we do try to do a lot of collection support. Here's the information. Here's where we learned it. Here's what we've got. Yes, we will definitely share our recipes. Email us. But yeah, you just kind of have to roll with it. And then Lori had the really good idea that our raw holiday program should be treated like a Friendsgiving. So we set up the room with tablecloths and cutlery. We put all the foods together. We demoed them and plated them, and then sat down to eat, which was really, really awkward, honestly, because it was a bunch of strangers, and trying to sit down to have a family meal with a bunch of strangers that you've just made raw food for, I don't recommend it at all.
We had a really great question about how long did food prep take? Forever. Hours. This was horrible. As a manager now, I cannot believe that this was allowed to happen. Maybe our bosses were not looking at us enough. We would get like 50, 60 people for each of these programs at every branch, even the smallest branch. But it took a good hour and a half of setup. My mandolin slicer was stolen, and it's just mental things. I was using a mandolin slicer at work. That it just wouldn't happen. So hire this out if you're going to have food programming.
Strongly recommending that. Also be careful when you're naming programs. So like you can see the third one down there is Tease Me. It's a terrible name. I thought it was really clever at the time. I thought it was so funny, but every time I got a meeting notification, it was Barry is going to tease me. Jenny is going to tease me, and it made me blush a little bit. So our next round was Sip or Slurp. And we had hefty donations of teas from Pete's Coffee that we allowed people to blend their own teas. People are really, really interested in knowing the right way to brew tea or coffee, or if they just wanted free samples or both. I'm not really 100% sure. The coffee was done in partnership with a local shop, Yellow Bill, who gave us the expert and the samples because I know nothing about coffee and it makes me sick. But they provided everything for free, and most of these programs are free or cheap. We focus a lot on not spending money on things. The Food of Love one, we thought it would be amazing, aphrodisiacs, but only 4 people came, and it was really tasty food, so I was very disappointed in that. Pride snacks were raw, healthy food that didn't require refrigeration, so they were portable, easy to share, something good for Pride. Excuse for doing a program in June, and we had 0 attendees outside of 3 kids who happened to be in my library at the time. They were always there, and so we made and shared snacks with them, and they liked it except for the ginger lemonade. They didn't like that, but they were little. They weren't into that kind of thing. So meeting up. How to win friends and embarrass people. I personally hate speed dating events. One of our librarians, Michelle, that Lori mentioned earlier, was super into doing this, so we did it for a couple of years in a row as a way to get people connecting in libraries and offer an alternative to the bar meetups. Our first one was in 2010, and we had separate events for same-sex and opposite sex. I was only at the same-sex one, and we had 30-plus people. We had a bartender serving donated wine, which frankly was necessary for something like this. And we had to have an algorithm written so that everyone could meet everyone. With heterosexuals, you can have one gender sit and the other gender move around the room. Easy. With one sex, you have to match everyone up. So we do have a breakdown for matching up to 20 people. And please do email me if you want it because you will never figure it out.
It's a really hefty math program.
Yeah, no, it was, wow, a lot of work. An age restriction probably could have helped.
We were trying to be as open as possible and not ageist in any way. But you do end up with some awkward dates between people, in their 70s and 23. So in the future, we might offer, we would offer separate programs, and other libraries have done the same. This is, lots of libraries have speed dating programs these days. So
yeah, and we did, because it's for book lovers, we had everybody bring a book as kind of an icebreaker so that you have something to talk about, and it had a bit of the library tie-in, so that worked out pretty well. We also had a card of pre-selected titles people could choose if they didn't bring their own. People complained that the 5-minute dates were too short. Well, yeah, it's speed dating. Fancy that. Everybody had a sheet to mark. We gathered them up. People weren't allowed to give out or ask for contact information, and in the 3 years of the program, I think we had 3 total matches. However, we had a speed friending event because one year we had an uneven amount of men and women. Women ended up chatting and liking each other, so we tried to do speed friending, and that failed. 5 people came, so don't do speed friending. We don't recommend it. And then year 3, we did the dating and friending. They weren't a huge success. They required a lot of work for very little payoff, but the exception was that one of the librarians in our system attended during the 2nd year because Lori was working it, and now they are happily married and have been for several years. So He came just to talk to Lori.
He did. So that was, I'm very happy to see Dating Forever and have the poster in my office. The good thing about speed dating for book lovers, though, it is the kind of media grabbing thing that worked for alt library. So although maybe not the most successful, got a lot of media attention, so it's getting the word out about libraries. So local history programming. All right. So confession, the husband, who is my husband now, is also an historian here for the Sacramento Public Library. So he's helped out with a lot of these. We have the Sacramento Library has this marvelous local history archives, and Jessica had the brilliant idea of outsourcing some of our programming to them. So so they've done things like the speakeasy tour and pub crawl. And we can't stretch our faking of knowledge that far. Mm-hmm. Haunted Stacks was a great deal of fun. There is a rumor that our history room is haunted. Occasionally, books are put away and then they can no longer be found. It's definitely, it's really scary stuff. So this, people dressed up like historical ghosts. And told the stories of actual deads here in Sacramento. It was good for a number of years. It was a lot of fun.
We also avoided telling the story of the serial killer Dorothea Puente because she only died recently. She was a landlady murderer, and she had folks come into her boarding facility. She murdered them, and she continued to collect their Social Security for years. So we did not put that in there because some of the victims' families are still around, and we thought that would be important.
Yeah, so we went way back, so like 1800s. This is a really cool event, Capital Decade. So they would take the decade of the year, like the 1910s, 20s, 30s, do some programming about Sacramento at the time, and have a fashion show, which was big death on alt library. So beautiful clothes.
Yes, lots of fun local history. And so in 2015, a new librarian took over because I became a manager and no longer had time to do programming. So we did old school Crayola and adult coloring. We tried to get submissions from folks of art so we could create our own coloring book on the espresso book machine, but no dice, nobody put anything in. And adult coloring is pretty common. Sac Wave, so creating electronic music using graphite and pencil drawings to do an oscillator circuit. We partnered with Music Landria, which is a local instrument lending library, on the Sac Wave series, but attendance was really low, like 2 or 3 people. And so we went through a series of kind of trying things to see what might stick. Screen printing. Bryce asked me, "Are you sure Werewolf with No Pants is okay?" Yeah, I'm fine with it. So they did some screen printing, they did gaming, and I ended up calling these Bryce's blind dates. Bryce used his own face in the librarian combat there because sometimes only one person would show. So 23 people would mark interested in Meetup, 1 person would show up in real life. Book versus movie, nobody came. We thought it was a really good idea. The books did check out when the events were posted, but nobody actually showed up. So then Bryce did some of the virtual programming. So the Rick and Morty one posted here, a push-up challenge, Saladzilla, and then a reading playlist. So like black metal songs to listen to while you're reading Tolkien. But again, not a whole lot of engagement. And unfortunately, Meetup is not really the place for online engagement in that. It's called Meetup because people want to meet up with each other. So we're still trying to get people in. And this was one of the prompts that we had, trying to see if we could lure more people to respond. So this year, something we did here at Central Library was the Hogwarts Alumni Reunion. If you have not read Harry Potter, this will mean basically nothing to you. But if you have, listen up. We've done a teen Yule Ball for the last 4 years, and attendance has swelled to well over 300 kids. We had to cut them out. And yes, Anne, we did count the participation for Rick and Morty via the comment count, but it was very low, like 2 or 3 people. But please do check out the Meetup, and you can see everything that we've done on there. So if there's something that you're curious about, again, email me or Lori or both of us, and we'll be able to give you more information about it. We restrict the ages for the Yule Ball to 13 through 19, and there were some folks in our alt demographic who were dying to attend. So a few of the folks in the system decided that they wanted to do an adult version that for people who were too old to still attend the Yule Ball, and called it the Hogwarts Alumni Reunion. We sold 200 tickets and had a 96% attendance rate, so that was a pretty healthy amount of people. We had owls, we had a recorded moaning myrtle in the bathroom, we had trivia, we had a costume contest, and so you can see some of the photos here from the event. People had a great time, and please do check out the Sac Library Facebook for more photos if you're curious. But it was very expensive and very time-consuming. Be prepared to speak to why you're using taxpayer money to do this kind of programming. It's in line with what we do. It is literacy, but it is hard to justify. And for the record, we did use friends' money for this, so it was not tax dollars, because it was in staff time and in actual time an unfathomable amount of money. So, but you can see we had nearly 200 adults having a fantastic time. So it went really well, but yikes. So to summarize, doing the programming, have an idea, good or bad, it doesn't actually really matter. Some of our ideas were both at the same time. It can be your idea or somebody else's idea. That also doesn't matter.
You know, credit.
Yeah, own it, but name it something catchy, name it something embarrassing, give it a title that will make people interested in it. Create a design, get help for it, that will make people want to pick it up off the ground. And, you know, for a good flyer, that's my kind of barometer of success. Would you pick that up off the ground to see what it is? And then buzz. So you've got to market it, promote it shamelessly everywhere to everyone, talk about it nonstop. Because if you don't want to talk about it, why would anybody else want to?
All right. So now for some real talk. As we've mentioned, Jessica and I are both now managers. So as the person in charge of the budget, I'm telling you that I am harder to convince than my bosses were in the past. And that's because I know exactly how much fun I had at work for years. And I was able to see how much time had to go into these programs to make them a success. So they really need to be connected to, I always say, connected to your strategic plan for sure. Jessica and I were very lucky with the Sacramento Public Library. Goal number one of the strategic plan for many years was increase positive public awareness of the library, and Alt Library did that in spades. You know, our library had a bit of troubles back 2008, 2009. So, you know, the community had a really poor perception. Alt Library was part of building it back up in trust and stuff. So definitely think, if you have an administration, think about it from their point of view. Like, why are they going to say yes to this? Tie it back to your goals and give them every reason to support you. I'm sure that they want to.
Absolutely. And don't be mediocre. And this is something that we've been talking about a lot. You have to do what you're best at. Books. We're good at literacy. We're good at those things. So it has to be either tied to that, or it has to be something that nobody else is doing. Punk rock aerobics. Nobody else in Sacramento was doing that. That was totally new, and it brought people in, and they didn't expect it. But that middle of the road, like having a movie night, leave that to people who are already doing that. Don't do something that exists in your community if you're not the best at it. So building community.
This is what we tried with Alt Library to begin with. So we thought that we would go out there and start this whole new thing. It worked to some degree, but looking back on things, building something from scratch is not the most useful tool. So we tried to reach out to existing communities. That worked a little bit better. So, you know, we're going and doing the programming where people are, but still, there's a better way. So these days, we're all about community-driven programming. So really trying to figure out what the community wants, and that is where your convincing arguments come for your administrators. If you've got people out in the community saying, hey, we want this, we want to engage with you on this thing. So get those community members who are your friends and excited about libraries, and kind of, you know, sit them down, ask them what they would like to do, and leave it pretty open-ended so they can come up with what they would like.
And this is also where Lori had written a grant for a Library Unexpected project that we did at Arcade when I was the supervisor there. And so it had 3 parts, but the Library of Things was the one that was the most popular and that really represents the community driven. So Library of Things is our collection of things that people can check out. So sewing machines, musical instruments, board games. Now we have a power washer and a
lawnmower.
Yeah. So this was something that we had a survey on our website, and we let people vote up what they wanted to see in this library of things, and it's been really popular, and it's been written up a lot of times, and I do recommend looking for library of things on our website. But it's been crazy bananas popular. But we would just ask them. We do the Harwood community conversations, where we talk to community stakeholders or organizations to ask them, what do you want for your community, and see how we could, as the library, support that. We also, when we did our strategic planning, had community conversations. Were you in on those?
No, I was
okay, you already gone.
Yeah.
Where we would have like open houses at different libraries and have conversations. What do you want from your library? What's important to you in your community? And have those meetings to get people's feedback to see what does the community want, and really try to be responsive to that, because that's how you show that you're invested, and then get people invested back in you.
Yeah, so I'm now the director of a suburban library 20 miles outside of Sacramento. So the only library in the county that's not Sacramento Public. It's a community of about 75,000 people. We have a little bit tighter budget, obviously. And we've done a recent needs assessment where people love books in my community. They just want to read. So the 20s and 30s programming that I'm focusing on there is a book club. It's okay to read YA book club that, much like alt library, is going to be meeting in a bar. So I can always tie it back to everything the community has actually said they want.
So, any questions? Here is our contact information again. If there's something that comes up, or that comes up later, or that you reflect on, and you want to email us, please, by all means, feel free to. We talk all the time, and we've been doing this off and on for lots of years. So we really enjoy what we've done, but we are both, kind of like Lori said, in a new phase of our careers. So my job now, supporting 7 branches, is ensuring that other folks get the chance to do cool stuff the way that I did, provided that it serves the community. And I think, what we used to do was things we thought we enjoyed, things that we thought would be cool. And we've both kind of taken a hard turn into, but what does the community want?
Yes.
And sometimes you do have to manufacture their voices.
Yeah.
If you've ever read Nina Simon's book, The Art of Relevance, she is the director for the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, and her book is incredibly good about museums and libraries and things, and how to be relevant to your community. We went to a training, an all-day training, no, three-day training? Oh, no, me and Lori, yeah, Amy, about how to be relevant in your community. And so if you can pick up that book, I strongly recommend it, because it really does speak to being your community's resource.
All right, and that's what we've got. I hope that you have enjoyed, and please do follow up with questions about any individual programs. We'll get you, if you want, we can get you those recipes. We'll have to dig a little bit. They're tasty.
Yes, I've got them in there somewhere.
And yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Thank you, Lori and Jessica. Anne asked a question. I don't know if you addressed it or not. What kind of music or background noise did you play for the Bad Art Night?
Yeah, so that was mostly classical music. So we tried to strike a balance between fancy pants things and some really dreadful glitter art.
Yeah, try to keep it classy-ish.
That's awesome. I think you both did a very good job of answering the questions as they came in, and I'm not seeing anything new. And as you said, your emails are on the screen, and people are welcome to email you. So I think we are going to go ahead and end the session. So again, I want to thank Jessica and Lori for taking the time to share everything they've done. I want to thank you for the rest of you for listening in and sharing your ideas and sharing your questions. As I mentioned in the intro, we have another webinar coming up on October 25th on using video to market library services. So again, thank you, Lori. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you all for listening in. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of your week. So long.